Are you enjoying the Single Tracks podcast? Well, we could use your support. The small but dedicated Single Tracks team works hard to share the mountain bike information that inspires epic adventures. Through this podcast, our worldwide database of trail maps and photos, and daily news and reviews on the website. So, consider becoming a monthly, annual, or lifetime pro supporter and enjoy ad-free browsing on the website, free Single Tracks stickers in the mail, and discounts on merch for as little as $3 per month. Go to singletracks.com/support to sign up and to find out other ways you can help support our mission. That's singletracks.com/support. Thank you and happy trails. Hey everybody, welcome to the Single Tracks podcast. My name is Jeff, and today my guest is Josie Fouts. Josie is a two-time National Paralympics road and track cycling champion with plans to compete at the 2021 Games in Tokyo. She's also working to make mountain biking a Paralympic sport and stars in a new short film called Go Josie. Thanks for joining us, Josie.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I'm excited to be here.
So you've only actually been racing for a couple of years. What were you doing before you started racing, and how did you begin?
Before I started racing, I was commuting 14 miles one way to UCSD. I worked as a lab manager in a microbiome lab, and it was, pun intended, the shit.
That's a huge commute.
Well, the way I saw it, and this is also kind of how I got into cycling and racing in general, is my partner Taylor, he would go out on these training rides and do like 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 miles in a day. Mm-hmm. And the way I saw it, I was like, oh, I can do 14 miles one way and then take the bus back. Mm-hmm. And then it slowly turned into 14 miles one way some days and then the extra 14 back as well.
Oh, wow.
And then work got really stressful, and I would just go back and forth, back and forth.
Awesome.
That's how I got into cycling in general. My partner started helping me commute faster and faster. I started off on a 80s beach cruiser.
Oh, wow.
With like a snowboard helmet. Yeah. And just tennis shoes.
Wow. You were riding that 14 miles?
Yeah, I only did that like a couple times before Taylor was like, all right, here's my mom's old hybrid. It's just going to be better. Yeah, and I was like, wow. Okay. I was like, it's a bike to me. Sure. I'll ride it.
So you're commuting to to school actually, on a beach cruiser. How did you decide that like you really wanted to get more serious about cycling?
It started with just one ride at a time, right? Like any big task. I just first started commuting. Mm-hmm. It started off one day at a time, one way. And then I built up to there and back. And then me trying to be a part of a bigger community. So what happened was, there's a local bike race here, Barrio Logan Grand Prix, and the women's race director was looking for any woman who could physically ride a bike to just join.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she was paying for my entry fee. I had a bike. I already rode my bike, and at that point, I was like, oh, there's no barriers not to do this. I'm going to be there supporting Taylor anyways. So why would I not?
Yeah.
And really,
when you say you had a bike, was this the beach cruiser or did you have like a proper bike by this point?
Ooh, by this point, it was like a 90s Miata with a carbon fork, but then down tube shifters.
Oh, so, wow. Retro.
Yeah, an upgrade, but still, again, baby steps.
Yeah.
So I kind of asked myself a question, or the way I looked at it, I was like, okay, so I could kind of be a hypocrite and not support the cycling community that is like family, or I can realize and feel and experience what it is to do a race. And in that sense, I was like, this is going to connect me with this community and also Taylor as well. And
Yeah.
I was like, all right, let's do it. I got dropped immediately, which is exactly how it goes for everyone.
Right.
But everybody was still so supportive. They were
Hmm.
like, "No, you did great. You I didn't come in last," and I was like, that was pretty much my goal. And yeah, there was a lot of right-hand turns, so I just focused on just nailing the turns.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was quite the experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, did you have experience racing before this, though? I think I read that you did track and field maybe when you were younger.
Yeah, I would do other sports.
Mm-hmm.
Running was my big endurance sport, but I never raced a bike, which is
Mm.
there's so much more to racing a bike rather than just going out there and giving it your all.
Yeah,
Sometimes you have to hold back, you know,
right,
and get the timing right.
right.
So, so I learned my first race that my timing was super off. I didn't really understand the tactics of a race,
Mm-hmm.
and but I finished, and that was my one goal for that first race.
That's awesome. Well, and now you're dedicated full time to racing, is that right?
Exactly. Yes, I am. I would call myself full-time athlete on the bike, and then off the bike full-time hustler, just to make more bike riding
Yeah.
sustainable.
What was it like when you made that decision to like focus on this full time? Like, how did you decide to do that?
Again, it was a lot of me trying to connect with my partner Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So before I had this opportunity, he would go through the ups and downs of life,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And racing a bike. So when on his rest days, he'd be like, "Oh man, do I like stop trying to be professional bike racer and then just go back to school and get a job like everyone else?"
Mm-hmm.
And I would pep talk him up to himself, and I would say, you know, you can't always go back and be bike racer. You're as
Mm-hmm.
close as you are now today. And school and jobs, they're always going to be out there.
Right.
So, like, why give up on something that you've been working so hard for already?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then when the opportunity to train for Tokyo came, I was like, all right, Josie, did you really mean it? Or were you just kind of saying it to be
Right.
nice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Interesting.
I just really didn't want to be a hypocrite of what I said and how I supported Taylor. And I was like, all right, worst case scenario, nothing happens, but I get to hang out with a bunch of cool people and I get into really good shape.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll take that chance. That was, and it was also like the best decision I could have made for myself.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, for those who are listening and haven't heard your story, you were born without your left hand. How has that influenced the way you see and approach challenges in racing and, I mean, I'm sure too, in life?
It's totally shaped the way that I think. Um,
Mm-hmm.
to start off, just a lot of mind over matter. It's not
Yeah.
about me being able to do what others people think I can't do. It's
Mm-hmm.
about me just doing it for myself.
Mm.
And I think that like is a big part of who I am and
Mm-hmm.
also makes me a really good bike racer too. Like instead of pushing for results, I just want to beat myself. Beat the last time I did this time trial
Mm-hmm.
or just improve on top of the accomplishments I've already had. And I think results are secondary and it's about the progress and the process that should be primary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it seems like I mean, you've had this approach your whole life, and I mean, you have an advanced degree, from what I understand. And so, I mean, does this apply to everything, or is racing like the biggest outlet that you found for that approach that you take to life?
Um, I think it's a little bit of both, just like everything. It's not like one way or another, but
Mm,
yeah, like I would say before I started training, again, everything was mind over matter, which is
mm-hmm.
why I went and got a higher degree and I just wanted to know what we knew about health. And I also wanted to make sure that what we were doing with the research was actually helping everybody else.
Yeah.
And like what we know is actually being translated to the public correctly. And when I got to the front line of science in the microbiome world, it was kind of funny. I realized we didn't know, again, pun intended, shit. We kind of know, but we also don't at the same time. And so me not actually knowing what to expect, that's kind of been the way I've lived my life. Like, okay, I know what I have, and I don't focus on what I don't have. So, and I kind of just let the future unfold for me. And I think I can see in science when researchers have an idea of the outcomes that they miss this really interesting aspect that they couldn't have predicted before. And that's really where the story is.
Right.
And that's like how you follow the science instead of leading the science. And I feel like for cycling and for training, especially for 2020, like that's why I could thrive in a time where it seemed as though everything else was dying. Races were dying, they were getting postponed.
Yeah.
Like everything just seemed like there was no future. But really, we just didn't know what the future had to hold.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, it sounds like you're saying you've been able to deal with uncertainty really well. Like uncertainty, I mean, people will be surprised to hear like science, there's uncertainty in science. I mean, I thought that was the one area where like, there's, truth and knowledge and all that. But like you said, once you get to the edge of that, there is this kind of uncertainty and there's things that we don't know. And there's new territories we haven't explored yet. And it sounds like you're seeing that in your fitness and your training as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. That is, you nailed the nail on the head.
Yeah. Well, so I noticed too, your Instagram handle is Ms. Stubbornness. So have you found being stubborn is a strength?
Oh, definitely. Me just being able to sit at a problem and just think about it 1,000 different ways from a whole bunch of different perspectives has really helped me comprehend that problem. And it turns out, oh, maybe this actually isn't a problem, but a solution for something else if I think of it that way.
Yeah.
But also, it kind of gets me into trouble when when I'm like working on a bike by myself and I don't really know what I'm doing and I'm just like literally just trying to make it work and then I'm just at it for way too long and then I'll have like a mechanic come in and they're just like, oh, it's actually pretty simple. All you have to do is like press harder or, give it a little bit more effort or it's sometimes bikes are counterintuitive and I also feel the same about science as well. So I guess it's just life.
Right. Yeah. And we had a perfect example of this setting up this podcast where, we were trying to get like the microphone and the inputs right. And, oh, you're on mute. No, you're on mute. And like, yeah, this is a perfect example of you just sticking to it and being like, we're going to find a solution here. Like, I'm not going to get like frustrated or overwhelmed or like, give up on this. Like, we're going to make it happen and then move on.
Exactly. That is my life. Welcome to it.
Yeah. That's awesome. So we kind of touched on this, but your formal education is actually in nutrition and nutrition immunology. So are you able to use some of that knowledge and education that you have in your own training, like in terms of how you fuel your body and how you take care of yourself?
Definitely. I think that nutrition is over glamorized in some aspects because they're just some companies are just trying to sell you a product. Like for me personally, I am not about prepackaged food or
Hmm.
in the sense of typical quote unquote ride food. I
Mm-hmm.
guess the quote should go around the food part.
Right. It's actual rides, not maybe not actual food.
Yeah. What I know from microbiome research is that the more holistic the food, the better.
Hmm.
And for example, sugars at the molecular level, they're going to be broken down identically whether it comes from a gel or
Mm-hmm.
from a piece of fruit.
Yeah.
But on the holistic level or the organism level, it's going to either affect you detrimentally
Mm-hmm.
or for your better health and well
Right.
being,
Huh.
like respectively. Yeah, so it's all about adjusting your focus and trying to weigh out the pros and cons, right? For
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Yeah.
Like do I buy this super lightweight part, but then I don't have money to enter the race that the lightweight part was for, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
It's all about finding the balance.
Yeah.
Um,
Did it take you a long time to find the right nutrition? And is it different from like what you're used to for running versus cycling?
yeah, definitely. I would say that it's still a work in progress. Like I'm still
Hmm.
working on this, even as like I would consider myself like an expert in gut health. Like I
Yeah.
know that we need whole foods. So now it's like solving a different problem of okay, what am I going to eat on a ride? And
Right.
how do I compare to this gel packet that you can get 90 grams of carbohydrates in an instant versus
Mm-hmm.
like trying to eat a whole bunch of bananas in the same amount of time to get the same
Right.
amount of carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
no, there's always going to be like struggles and barriers, but it's about like what can you deal with and what can you put up with? Like you pick and choose your battles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that you studied specifically gut health because that is something, especially when people are like, training, like they're on the bike or even just out for a ride. You're out with your friends on the weekend and you're riding all day, and that seems to be like the biggest challenge people have with nutrition is like, what am I going to eat that's not going to make me like just feel awful during the ride? And like you said, for most of us it's like we have to experiment. Like is there not like a universal thing? Like do we all have really different guts that have like different needs and ways that they operate?
Definitely. And I think that's the whole point of health is that it's all personalized and every experience that you have is going to be different than the person next to you and it is based on not just nature and your genetics but like nurture and the environment that
Mm-hmm.
you put yourself into.
Hmm.
And something else that people don't realize is that you can train your gut to take in whatever you want to take in. So,
Really?
yeah, like for example, if you're trying to get to like 90 to 120 grams of carbohydrates per hour, no matter
Mm-hmm.
where they are coming from as a
Mm-hmm.
source, if you're used to only 20 grams per hour, you can't
Mm-hmm.
just jump right into 90 or
Ah,
120.
yeah.
Like, it's the same with training. Like, if right?
Yeah.
It's all about the baby steps and building up and the progress. It's not about the destination or the end game or the final race or
Yeah.
Tokyo or the finish line. It's about, all right, having this be a part of the process.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right. So you can look at your friend who, they can eat Cliff Bars all day and, you can't even look at a Cliff Bar without like, your stomach starting to cramp up. So I
Hmm.
guess we can't just take advice from others and say, well, what do you eat? Or, what works for you? It's something we all have to figure out.
Exactly. And I think that being a congenital amputee, not having my left hand from birth, that's exactly my mindset. Like I see
Mm.
what other people are doing, I'm like, okay, but how is this going to work for me? And how do
Mm.
I take what they are saying and fit it into my lifestyle?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, you mentioned your first bike race and basically getting dropped really early on in the race. What is the level of competition like at the US National Paralympics? Were you surprised there as well the first time you competed?
Yeah, definitely. So it was actually a complete 180 of my first bike experience as an
Hmm.
quote unquote able bodied cyclist.
Yeah.
So at my first track competition, and again, I was underbiked, I was on a steel frame bike that was a little bit too big for me, but
Hmm.
I could clip in. And I was like, all right, that's just a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And on that steel frame Shimano Lindsay, I won two national championships and set a
Wow.
national record.
Oh my goodness. That's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. I mean, did you expect anything close to that, or like what did going into it, what were you hoping to do?
I was hoping to just finish the same as my first bike race. I was like, all right,
Wow.
here we go. Like, so that was in December of 2018. And in November is when I just took my track level one course.
Hmm.
And 1 month before that is when I quit my job.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, it all
So that
happened
that
really
really
fast.
validated your decision, I'm sure. Where, yeah, going into it, you're probably like, man, did I make the right decision? And then after that race, I imagine you felt a lot different.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, as a scientist, I understand like confounding factors and how random things can influence the result and how much of life is just randomness and luck. And so
Hmm.
for me to win and accomplish so much in just my first race, I was like,
Hmm.
all right, it's pretty obvious here. Like, all right,
Yeah.
I got it. Message is
Right.
clear. Keep riding a bicycle. Okay.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, in the film Go Josie, we see you working with your friend Leo to modify your bike and your equipment for racing. So, how difficult has it been to find off the shelf products that work for you and for other para athletes?
It is pretty difficult. Nothing out there is made for us specifically because we
Hmm.
are super unique. So it's not
Right.
exactly about the product, it's about how you use the product.
Hmm.
Um, for example, for the film, I was setting up two brakes to be controlled with my one hand. And so we have the regular brake shifter lever,
Hmm.
but then we needed a old brake mountain bike top lever to clamp around the drop like it was a sprinter shifter, but
Huh.
just it's a brake.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not like any brake is gonna work. It's got to be like an XTR or XR
Hmm.
brake lever from 2005 to 2012.
Oh,
And
wow.
the left,
So it's not
yeah,
even new stuff. Like you're having to track down old parts that are going to work for kind of the solution you found.
yes, exactly. So it's a little bit more challenging, but again, like I'm kind of just used to the challenge of
Yeah.
everyday life. So it's nothing new to me. I'm just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Out of stock, can't have it, or don't have it, can't get it. Makes yeah, this is how it goes.
Right. Yeah. Well, have you found that gear manufacturers are willing to work with you to help you come up with those solutions, or do you feel like you're sort of on your own for a lot of it?
I feel like manufacturers don't condone what I'm doing. They can't.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
they're
I'm
worried
doing
about safety or yeah.
like, exactly. So it's really up to my community and the people that I work with to come up with these adaptive and innovative ideas. And I
Hmm.
found out that like even able-bodied mechanics, not just Leo, they enjoy working on actual problems like
Mm.
how do I brake with one hand but two brakes
Right.
versus just changing another flat.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's a fun challenge and you get to create something that maybe has never existed before.
Exactly. And it's just also so much more satisfying once you finish. It's amazing. And I feel like also this is why I don't do well with routine, like the
Mm,
everyday stuff. I'm just like,
mm-hmm.
it's kind of boring because, like, where's the excitement? Where's the struggle? Uh,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I've been learning that about myself, the balance of my traits.
Right. Right. Well, one of your sponsors, Swiftwick, actually has a couple different products, I believe, for amputees, including the Valor below knee prosthetic sock. So, what's it been like working with a brand like Swiftwick? I mean, it sounds like that's unusual that most brands they don't, they can't make products because everyone has sort of unique needs. But it sounds like Swiftwick has kind of a different approach, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Swiftwick is super progressive, I would say, as a company in general. Like, one,
Hmm.
for me to be an arm amputee and not actually have the correct use for their valor, but they're
Mm-hmm.
still saying, yes, we want you to be a Swiftwick athlete because we know that sharing your story is going to be more important than us selling another pair of socks.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's been amazing. It's really like empowering.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I've always put myself in situations where I struggle more than the average person because, like we just talked about, like that's what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm used to people, mentors, uh, bosses being like, yes, you can do this, but dot, 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 there's this exception.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, Swiftwick, all they said was yes. And the
Huh.
cycling community, they're like, oh, you want to go to the Paralympics? Yes, let's do it. No exceptions, no buts, just
Yeah.
let's do it. We can do it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that's it. And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just going to do it. I'm like, nice.
That's awesome. Yeah. Sounds like you found your people. I mean, it sounds like that's kind of your personality and you're able to connect with people in the industry that kind of feel the same way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it definitely puts me in a new situation where I haven't been this connected with a bigger community, and that's what the film Go Josie is all about. Me realizing why I push myself on the outside, but at the same time continuously push my limits. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's the one trait and it has two sides to it. So
Right.
it's, yeah, super interesting
Yeah.
realizing these things about myself.
That's awesome. Awesome journey. So, are there things that you've found or maybe have experienced yourself about mountain bike trail designs or even events that maybe could be made more para-friendly, or are you just more interested in adapting yourself and kind of seeing how you can make it work for you personally?
If cycling has taught me anything, it, like, progress and big goals come from the inside out. So
Hmm.
right now I'm in the phase of just me getting myself out there so then other
Mm-hmm.
people can see visually how a para athlete would be able to be out there. And
Yeah.
then from there, we can work together to make the trails more accessible, to make the
Mm-hmm.
bikes more rideable, and then to build para mountain biking as a sport with more support and a bigger foundation.
Yeah.
And I've learned being around the Paralympics scene that most amputees are acquired. They have
Hmm.
acquired their disability.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of puts me in a unique situation. And I'm like, okay, so how do I help these athletes who went from knowing how life is one way, we'll say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to analogize that with like the pole line on a track.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything is straightforward. You follow this line, the path is laid out for you.
Right.
And I think that to help para athletes better, we're doing a disservice by not encouraging them to go outside onto trails where They undulate, and there is no straightforward line or literal painted line on the road.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
about just getting over the hill or getting up the climb, however you can do it. And
Mm-hmm.
only you will know how to do that. And at the same time, that will give you confidence to then descend that on the other side of that hill.
Right. Yeah.
And also, like, the research that I've been reading just about how to be the best human possible, it says that our environment shapes who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So the best environment for me to be the most human and to reach my highest potential is to
Mm-hmm.
be outside in nature.
Mm.
And when I think about it more, it totally makes sense. Like, nothing is flat colored. There's no smooth surfaces.
Yeah.
Like, everything has dimension and shades and like depth to it. And
Yeah.
I think that literally helps the brain process things faster. Like, when you're out there on the trail, you can't like nitpick over every rock. You are just not going to get anywhere if you do. So you
Right.
have to let some of those small rocks go. And in life too, you can't just have all these problems and to like deal with everyone. Some things you
Mm-hmm.
gotta let go. You gotta pick and choose what you're going to spend your energy and time into. And I
Yeah.
think like that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm advocating for para mountain biking. I think it's going to push us to be our best
Mm-hmm.
physically, mentally, and from there, just like road racing and track will come really easily. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, look at the Pro Men World Tour. Who's blowing it up right now? We got Vanderpool and Wout Van Aert. Like, where
Mm-hmm.
did they come from? Cyclocross, where it's
Right.
outside in the elements, you're pushing yourself. Yeah, it's really challenging to be out there. And then they get over onto road and they do the thing that everyone's like, no, no, you can't lead out a sprint and then win your sprint. Like, they're doing it,
Right.
they're crushing
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, boom, right there. I totally know why. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's my approach to training for Tokyo 100%. Like, the deeper I get out into nature, the better the training and the
Yeah.
better then the results will be for Tokyo.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, yeah, you paint mountain biking as, I mean, really at the core, it's a metaphor for life. I mean, facing these challenges and getting out there and, racing around a track is, I guess it's another metaphor. You're just kind of spinning in circles and you're not really getting anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I totally connect with that. Why do you think the Paralympics so far has not included mountain biking?
I think it's a lack of understanding. And to be like even more specific, a lack of visually seen para athletes out on trails, which
Hmm.
again is why it's so important for films like Go Josie to be produced. And that's
Mm-hmm.
also like those things can't happen without progressive sponsors like Swiftwick, like Shimano,
Right.
Laser, Pearl Izumi. They all said yes. And I was like, oh, okay, let's do this. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so I think it's a lack of helping para athletes realize their full potential, which
Mm-hmm.
then makes a lack of attendance for para any race.
Mm-hmm.
And then in return, that tells the race promoters that they shouldn't put their efforts into it. So
Yeah.
life is all about cycles, right?
Right.
So then that creates this like kind of vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But once we start including para athletes into these stories and into these videos, then it starts this cycle of like sustainability here.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got now athletes being able to see what we're capable of and to see their full potential. Whether you're able bodied or para, I'll say this from my own experience that I am more inspired and empowered by seeing another para athlete ride their bike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
For
then
sure.
from there, that builds more people on bikes, and then we're going to have more races, and then we're going to have a bigger sport. So, and then it's just going to, again, life goes in cycles. It's just going to repeat itself.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think it's a sport yet. But that's also why I think that this time around it's going to be different, because it's starting with a para athlete who just wants to ride her bike outside in nature because she knows that's how she's going to be the best human possible, as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, we're hearing a lot now about how representation is really important in terms of like inspiring others and basically showing like what we can do. And it, you know, it seems like your story is absolutely about representation, saying, look, you know, I'm doing this and others can do it as well. And you make a really good point that, you know, I guess maybe on the surface it would seem like you're there to inspire other para athletes, but like you said, I think it's much bigger than that. You know, it inspires all people. I mean, there's plenty of people, you know, most of my neighbors don't ride mountain bikes, and, you know, maybe some of that is because they think it's too hard, or, you know, they're not sure it'd be much fun. But if they see someone like you doing it, like, that inspires them as well. I mean, maybe it inspires them even more than if they saw, you know, Aaron Gwynn or somebody who's like, you know, top of the sport, like athletes doing something like that. You know, maybe this inspires them in a different way.
Exactly. And it's all about looking at the same problem from a different perspective, right? Like, it's not about what I don't have, it's about what I can offer to those people who have yet to be inspired.
Yeah.
And again, that's how I've lived my life. I don't focus on what I don't have. I just focus on what I have and how I can use it to get to where I want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you mentioned it, and also saw a recent Instagram post that you wrote where you were saying that routine bores you. So how do you keep your workouts and your training interesting? Like, is training fun for you, or is that something that can be boring or routine sometimes?
The way I see training is just me trying to be a better version of myself than yesterday. Whereas I think the average racer sees training as the means to be competitive at a race. And I feel like that was very apparent to me when 2020 happened, where everything was canceled and postponed.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I like knew what I had to do before then. It was like, okay, I'm going to race every weekend basically until Tokyo to get as much experience as possible. And after everything was postponed, then I had the opportunity to take a step back and be like, is this actually what I think is going to make me a better bike racer? Or am I just doing this because everybody else is doing it? And it turns out, like, as I'm learning about myself on the bicycle, I hate doing the thing that everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Why? Is it boring? I mean, what is everybody else doing? Are they doing like repeats of climbs, or like, I don't know, loops around a track, or like, yeah, I mean, I imagine a lot of it is boring, but I guess I don't know specifically what a cycling training plan would even look like at your level.
Honestly, it's probably the same for any new cyclist. So now I have a year or 2 years worth of data to build upon. The first 2 years were definitely just collecting data. So it was just me kind of observing myself and observing the race and the culture and what the preparation, the work that needed to go into it. And so now I feel like I'm actually making a plan, making actionable items. And to keep, for me, training interesting, well, I guess life kind of does this for me, but it always throws new challenges at me. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, so I thought I knew how to ride a bicycle at the end of year one, but
Mm-hmm.
then I got a new bike, a lighter bike, and it was a little bit different. So I had to relearn how to
Yeah.
ride that bike. And then I got a mountain bike, and then I was like, whoa, I was not even riding any of those bikes before correctly at all.
Yeah.
And now I have a prosthetic to work with. So, in a sense, cycling is helping me accept routine
Mm-hmm.
with a little bit of a spin. Uh, Pun intended, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like I'm reteaching myself how to ride a bicycle, but at the same time, I'm progressing on top of what I already had. And
Mm.
again, it's all about like the baby steps and easing into anything rather than jumping and going all in, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
usually do. So,
Right. But do you think
yeah.
you'll ever get bored? Will you ever get bored in cycling? Will there be a time when you're ready to move on from that? Or do you think it's like big enough and deep enough to like really, I don't know, spend the next few decades doing it?
Um, I think this is a sport for life for sure.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
just thinking about how cycling is set up versus other sports. For example, the play of field. There is no boundaries or in bounds or out of bounds for like when you practice or when you train.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's like where can I reach and how long will it take me to get there? And
Mm-hmm.
will I be prepared? So it's like there's always going to be different parts of the world that I can reach. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, at the same time, that's what's going to make me a better cyclist and a better human. So I'm just going to be able to reach those depths like infinitely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So what was it like filming Go Josie? Did you enjoy the spotlight? Was that like a new experience for you to kind of be at the center of a project like that?
Oh, definitely. That was super new. I've never had so much, I guess, wanted attention. I usually have a lot of unwanted attention. So,
Uh-huh.
like, now it was like a little bit different.
Hmm.
It really, it's not, okay. So, when I went into Go Josie, I thought I was just going to make like a cool film where I'm just like shredding on the dirt and then like we're doing slow mos and stuff.
Yeah.
And but what it turned out to be was just me learning so much more about myself that I never took the
Hmm.
time to ask myself or
Yeah.
to give myself the time before. And that's what I
Hmm.
really learned about this film.
Yeah.
And
Was
and
that
I
your
think
intent going into it, or did you think that's what you would get out of it, or did this come as like a real surprise?
um it came as a surprise. Like I said, I don't really have a lot of expectations or I don't really know what's going to happen. So I was prepared to answer
Mm-hmm.
these really hard questions. Uh, but I wasn't prepared for like the spillover afterwards.
Hmm.
This film was kind of like scratching the surface of like who is Josie at her core?
Mm-hmm.
What is her how has her past shaped who she is today? And
Mm-hmm.
then after the filming, just like everything in hindsight, I was like, oh my gosh, I have all these other things that I want to say and that I could
Hmm.
have said better.
Oh
And
yeah.
and then I really started digging deeper into like who I am and like who I want to be as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like
Yeah.
it wasn't what I wanted, but is what I was needed.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, and we've seen this too, I guess, in other films as well. I mean, Rebecca Rush's Blood Road
Hmm.
movie kind of comes to mind for me. It seems like she was on kind of a similar journey, and for those of us who, most of us who have never been a part of that, I think that's a really interesting insight. That kind of seeing yourself in the camera and in the lens, like really gives you a new perspective. And it sounds like you were able to capitalize on that.
Yeah, it was super amazing. It's actually pretty funny. So I built this gravel bike, and it was just a metaphor for life, just like everything bike related is. So I'm like building this gravel bike in my garage, and it's going really, really slow because I'm being stubborn and I just want to build it myself. I just want to do it by myself.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but throughout the filming and the interviews, I figure out why. And then I'm like, all right, well, I got to do the thing that I don't like doing, which is asking for help. But if I can ask for help from Leo Rogers, who has a different perspective than the average person that I would ask for help, then I'm like, oh, well, this is actually better than me asking for help from anyone else. So
yeah, it sounds like, I mean, that's lessons that a lot of us can learn as well. Trying to do too much ourselves, or, you know, as mountain bikers too, a lot of us kind of are introverts, or a lot of us are people who, don't like asking for help. We like to be independent and be able to do things on our own. But, we're all connected, and we all do need help from each other. And there's, like you said at the very beginning, like, there's this awesome community around cycling, and, you know, hopefully people aren't, you know, judgmental as much, or they're not hard to approach as well. You know, that's kind of what I've found in the cycling community, and hopefully others have as well.
Yeah, I totally have felt that as well. Yeah, and it's about not just only being independent or always relying on other people, right? It's about the balance of doing both, being able to do both well at the right time.
So many puns and metaphors that you can do with cycling, right? Balance and spinning your wheels. It's endless. So you were telling me before we started the interview that you just completed your first bike packing trip. What was that like? What did you learn on that trip?
I learned actually exactly what I knew or have been learning about myself, is that I'm always underprepared. I am underbiked, undergeared, like...
You're confident though, or would you say you're overconfident?
I would definitely say a little bit of both. Like, I apparently have this really good innate ability just to tune out any danger, fear, or negative emotions. And so when I'm going down a single track road with a rut in the middle of it, and then 28 to 30 millimeter tires, but then a giant like cliff face to the right, I can just like zoom in and tune everything else out. Like, I'm like, there is no danger. Like, all I have to do is get down in one piece.
Right.
And apparently that's the way I work. It was funny because of that same reason and my same ability, we were riding almost close to home. We're about to get some food. We're on a bike path in Santee, which is just outside of San Diego. But there's a giant snake on the bike path, and I don't see it. Because, like, apparently I'm just tuning it out. And, and like, the people I was with, they're like, oh, yeah, well, we stopped, and so Josie will stop. But then I didn't stop. And they're like, oh, well, I see a big snake, so Josie will see it. And so it was actually pretty funny because by the time I realized what was happening, I ran the snake over, and I was just, and it was already like slithering off the path, but apparently it was like 4 to 6 feet long, and I just totally missed it. Luckily it was a garter snake and nothing dangerous, or more dangerous. But it, so I learned that about myself, which I kind of already knew, but now I know at a deeper level.
Hopefully you apologize to the snake.
Yes, it was It was quite the eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
But again, like, it was amazing just being out in the middle of nowhere,
Mm.
but at the same time somewhere. Like, I kind of knew where I was.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a one-nighter. I usually jump into things underprepared and I go
Mm-hmm.
way too big. So this was me practicing pacing myself. So we
Mm.
did an
Yeah.
one-nighter, 105 miles. It was like 11 hours of ride time.
Mm.
And
Wow.
yeah, it was beautiful. I can't express like the feelings of sleeping in a bivvy for the first time, just straight on the ground, just
Yeah.
bivvy and sleeping bag, nothing else. And I was like,
Yeah.
again, just underprepared. This is how I do things.
Right. But
Yeah.
you made it out the other side. Is bike packing something you think you'll do more of, or could you even see yourself doing a bike packing race?
Oh, definitely. I love bikepacking because it can't get canceled. It can't get
Mm.
postponed.
Right.
Like, who's to say that it's not going to happen? Only me. So if
Right.
I
Mm.
make this excuses for myself, then it's on me. It's not on anybody else. I have
Right.
nobody else to blame but myself. And that's why I love getting out there on the bicycle in nature because I make these connections and I'm like, oh, I'm actually holding myself back or I've been making excuses for these other things in my life when really it's about me.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like that outlook is perfectly tailored toward these like fastest known time attempts that, a lot of people are getting into right now. Does that have any appeal to you?
Oh, definitely. I am super excited to start being the first para athletes to set out fastest known times.
Ah,
And
nice.
yeah, specifically, I want to do the White Rim Trail after Tokyo.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a big one. Big challenge and a really well-known route as well.
exactly. But it's kind of cool because I'm in this situation where I can set the bar and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter how big or low that bar is. So I don't have to like hammer down and just look straight at the road the whole time. I can like kind of take a more relaxed pace, enjoy the views, just be happy to be outside and to be pushing myself, but at the same time trailblazing, pun intended,
Mm-hmm.
for
Right.
other para athletes to push themselves as well.
Yeah.
Um, like,
Then you'll
yeah,
have to get back out there though as soon as your record falls, right? But I guess
exactly.
that's what it's all about.
Yeah, like that's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah.
That's what I
That's
want. I want some challenge.
right. That's awesome. Well, are there any other challenges that you've set for yourself this year? I mean, you've already got a really big year with Tokyo, and then also it sounds like your White Rim fastest known time attempt. Are there other things you're looking forward to as well?
I have some personal challenges, like just learning how to use a prosthetic for riding, uh, which is making me physically balanced,
Mm-hmm.
both on and off the bike. Holy crap. Like, obviously, I've been short-handed my whole life, but
Mm-hmm.
now that I have a claw, I call it the claw. It
Yeah.
kind of looks like a giant Lego hand. It just kind of pops on round rod shaped things and pops off,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
um, which is perfect. Uh, so that's like a personal challenge I have for me.
Yeah.
And
Is
then,
this and you hadn't worn one before this, before you got into cycling, is that right?
correct. I tried
Hmm.
some when I was younger, but I totally rejected them. I never wore them. Um,
Hmm.
Man, imagine like a grade schooler, like fifth grader, Josie Fouts,
Hmm.
going to a prosthesis and he's being like, Josie, we gave you the top of the line prosthetic with myoelectric abilities to move one finger.
Yeah.
And in my head, I was like, oh, they're giving me a hand. They're giving me an
Mm-hmm.
actual hand that I can use.
Yeah.
That's like my right
Yeah.
hand. But then
Right.
I get this, and it's the expectations are lowered, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, they're like, what can you do? And I'm like, peel a banana really, really slowly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was also part of like me learning about myself and why I have the outlook and perspective that I do.
Yeah.
But now it's like, it's time to balance that out. I've been very mind over matter or mind over body my whole life. And
Yeah.
now with this prosthetic, I'm like, okay, well, and with cycling in general, I'm like, I need more balance, literally. And metaphorically, I just need
Right.
to accept that there is no hand. It's not as long. My left arm is not as long as my right. So I shouldn't treat it like it is. Because that's
Right.
just pulling my body in one direction.
Yeah.
So that's a big challenge for me. And just like my fitness and just like my cycling journey and my cycling career, it's going to be a process. So I'm excited
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what does your competition look like for Tokyo? Or do you know some of the other athletes like from other countries that you'll be competing against?
Yeah, so I've been to a couple of international events. But the way that I see cycling for myself, especially as a new athlete, is that I need to focus on myself rather than my competition and rely on my ability to go with an attack or to counter attack rather than be like, okay, so number 12 is the strongest athlete out there. If it's a
Yeah.
sprint, like those things, I don't see how, like, at my level it's gonna be worth the effort. Like, I just have
Yeah.
to like relearn and teach myself how to ride a bike. um, but that's
Yeah.
just me, and I know that my perspective will change along this journey. So
Yeah.
like,
Well, it sounds like you approach a lot of things, including racing, sort of as a problem solver, right? Like I'm not going to have all the answers ahead of time. I'm going to show up and I'm going to figure it out while I'm there. I'm going to see what the problem is and I'm going to find a way to solve it.
exactly. And honestly, that's to me mostly about how life works. Like, think about all the bike races or life instances where you have a plan to set out. But like, how
Right.
many times does it go exactly according to plan?
Right.
Like,
And then what do
yeah,
you do when it doesn't? I mean, a lot of people,
yeah,
they fall apart when they have their plan and it doesn't work out and then they're stuck and they don't know what to do.
exactly. Like science taught me that as well. Like, you have the theory, but then you actually have real life. And that's also what I'm learning about myself, is that I have a lot of theory in my head. Again, mind over body. So now I have to actually put these theories into practice, and this is what Tokyo is for me. It's just me challenging myself, not just physically, but also mentally, about what I know and applying it to real life situations.
Yeah.
And I think with that perspective, rather than I have to medal at Tokyo or Tokyo is the end goal, like for me, Tokyo is like not even the finish line. Like for me, trying to set that para FKT on the White Room Trail is my finish line for the year. Like, that's going to set me up and other people up for more success than I think winning medals for myself at Tokyo is going to
Right.
do. But Tokyo's a part of the journey and a part of the process. And now, instead of having Tokyo be the finish line, I'm looking way past Tokyo. And if any athlete knows this, it knows that you don't look at the finish line. You don't focus on that. You look
Right.
past it, and then you
Yeah.
perform much better than if you were to hyper focus.
That's awesome. Really, really good life lessons. And yeah, your outlook is incredible and your story is super inspirational. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And of course, best of luck at Tokyo, but also in your FKTs and in everything that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Single Tracks, for sharing my story, because, again, hearing these things and being able to see para athletes out there, that's the first step into more bicycles be sorry Man,
That's all right.
I feel like I'm getting
You got thrown
fatigued.
off. That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sharing these stories is really the first step of making para-mountain biking into a Paralympic sport. And to also just get more cyclists out there.
Yeah. Well, you can keep up with Josie on Instagram, and we'll have her handle linked in the show notes here. And also be sure to watch Go Josie online and keep up with her latest adventures. That's all we've got this week. We'll talk to you again next week.